It's a huge misunderstanding widely. Like, you don't just one-to-one burn the amount of calories that your wearable says you burn every time you walk or exercise. And if you do, there are, 23 and a half other hours in the day that you're not walking or running.
Right. This is Generation Health. Every week, we bring you the latest in news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices, helping you live a longer, healthier life. Sitting across from me, PharmD, certified strength and conditioning specialist, Dante DiMatteo. How are you, my friend?
Not too bad. I'm coming off the COVID here recently, but beyond that,
I think we just got us banned on all platforms. You're not allowed to say the word. But you're feeling good?
Feeling pretty good.
Excellent. That's why I'm keeping 4.5 feet away from you.
That, if anything's going to get us banned, it was that.
Oh, sorry. And riding mic number 3 is... Where's Josiah?
Good question. Where is everybody?
I don't know. Well, we'll rock without him today. Maybe we'll find him later. My name is Tyler Andrews, and I am the host. What are we talking about, Dante?
We are talking about what to use with a wearable device.
Oh, all right.
What to ignore.
Okay. Oh, okay. So there's some things we use and something. I got it. That's good.
At least in our humble, somewhat evidence-based opinion.
Fair enough. Well, first, let me share what is going on behind the counter. One of the most common food allergies affecting kids these days is peanut allergies. And anyone who has kids in public schools or private schools knows just how frustrating it can be, even if your child isn't the one with the allergy. But current treatments by allergists involve combining peanut flour with other foods and feeding it to the child under supervision. They're somewhat effective, but there is risk of severe reaction with that treatment. The Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology has published new research into a therapy called sublingual immunotherapy. During the therapy, allergists put a few drops of a pure peanut protein underneath the tongue of a child between the ages of 1 and 4. And they did this for a long time. It was a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial that lasted 3 years. And the results exceeded expectations. They were 80% of peanut allergic toddlers tolerated 15 peanuts without symptoms by the end of treatment. Typically, for a peanut allergic child, 1 peanut will set them off. So for them to be able to tolerate 15, that's outstanding. The desensitization, they said, was on par with the current therapy, but 63% stayed protected 3 months after stopping treatment. And the best part is this is an easier, better, faster, and safer treatment because the likelihood of severe allergic reaction requiring emergency medical care is significantly lower with this new protein treatment. So very cool. If you have a little one with peanut allergies, ask about that at the doctor. And some interesting news out of Europe. Heart injuries, like a heart attack, cause the body to release a protein into the blood called troponin. When you go to the hospital, the doctor will often perform a test looking for that as a sign of what could be the problem, especially if you're complaining of things like chest pain or what have you. Current tests catch about 80% of the cases where that has occurred, but that means that about 20% get missed. And they have to be caught by other signs or indicators, or they just don't get caught at all. About 20% of all patients who have had a heart attack will have another within the next 5 years. And that's really, really rough, especially in those first few months following the heart attack. The risk is just off the charts. So knowing that you have had a heart attack and being treated immediately is key. So of all the people who have had heart attacks, about 1 in 5 is at an exceedingly high risk of having a second heart attack because they were never told they had one to begin with. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh have developed a new high-sensitivity test for troponin. They tested it at 10 ERs across Scotland on over 50,000 people. 2,000 of those were only caught by the new test. Now, of course, not all 50,000 had had heart attacks. About 10,000 of them had. But 2,000 of those tests were only caught with the new high-sensitivity test. Researchers followed all 50,000 people for 5 years, and this allowed for a roughly 10% reduction of second heart attacks in the at-risk group because they were able to get appropriate treatment. These tests have now been rolled out all over the UK and will hopefully be coming to the US in the very near future. So if you go in checking for chest pain or heart attack, make sure that you talk to the folks in the ER and ask if it's the...
If you can.
Yeah, if you can. They may not have it yet, but...
Yeah, I mean, at least you know there's some cutting edge, lab work being done potentially.
That there's a new way of catching things that had been previously unnoticed. That's a really cool... Mm-hmm. That's a really cool thing in my estimation. Now, typically at this point, I would ask you a question, but I don't have any questions to ask you about that.
Those couple of things at face value are useful.
Yeah, they're exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we're talking about wearables.
Yeah.
We talked about pedometers a few episodes ago. Mm-hmm. This makes sense. Happy New Year, everybody. We should have said that. Welcome to 2024. Of course, you're watching this in 2024, but when we're recording this, it's still 2023. How's the future? Did we make it? There's open questions. We might not. Mm-hmm. So this could be released and there's nobody to listen to it. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Good point.
But no, a lot of people, I know not this year, but last year, my son got his first wearable for Christmas. It's what he really wanted. I have one now because I follow my son's lead. I know a lot of people get them over Black Friday and the holidays. This makes sense. You said there's some things we should pay attention to and some things we shouldn't.
Yeah. So to your point, just taking the accelerometer or the pedometer conversation a step further.
Yeah.
And there are biometrics that, can really help you hone in on some behavioral aspects of your life, can, help you with other more serious clinical issues potentially.
Sure.
So we can certainly touch on all, facets of where these might be useful. But in general, what we're looking at, so how are these, what are these referred to in the literature?
Yeah,
in many of the studies that we talk about, or at least one of the papers that we reference. So they are referred to as WBMDs. So wearable biometric monitoring devices.
Okay.
So that could be a watch. It could be a patch.
For most people, it's a watch.
It could be a Fitbit type thing. Right. For most people at this point, it is a watch. But the Whoop, for example, doesn't have a screen. It sits where a watch would sit, or they have, bicep bands and, you can put a band around your thigh.
Okay.
So in general, again, like we're alluding to, they're used primarily in the context of health. Mm-hmm. And so that's aspects like biomedical research, clinical care, specifically personal health, which mm-hmm. I think a lot of this conversation will be centered around, plus, a million other things. But mm-hmm. those are kind of the big ones. In the context of health, some research, some, personal care, some clinical care. So between you and a physician or you and a provider.
So for us, we're primarily talking about the personal and with a physician.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the function. So in one of the papers that we are going to be referring to, it's by Canali and colleagues. They broke it into 4 nice functional categories. So the first one is monitoring. And so that would be things like pulse monitoring or advanced telemonitoring. So that's essentially like heart rate or rhythm or some sort of key cardiovascular parameter that's being shared directly with your provider. So that's more of a, somebody's monitoring what's happening physiologically with you, maybe from a distance.
And theoretically, that would be in a case where there's a known mm-hmm. risk. Sure. I assume somebody who maybe had a heart attack. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That's not just everybody, Big Brother's watching your heart rate kind of thing.
No, but I'm sure that there's a lot of those. Yeah, there's a lot of those implications in general.
Yeah, the
privacy
concern.
Is a huge concern with these. So yeah. The second aspect would be screening. Mm-hmm. So screening, monitoring, sounds like the same thing. Screening is more like trying to find at what point somebody's over the threshold for some sort of disease state that we might care about.
Right.
So you're screening specifically for AFib. You're screening specifically for sleep apnea. There are companies that will send you a device to wear And based upon your oxygen saturation, heart rate, your movement, it can, detect a clinical or subclinical sleep apnea.
Right.
And then, like we mentioned, cardiovascular disease as well. Detection. It's funny, all these terms sound similar.
Yeah.
But to break them out helps a little bit. So detection, we're looking at simply physical activity levels. So you might notice that your watch detects from 11:30 to 12:15, your heart rate was higher, and it noticed that maybe you were exercising or you were on a long walk. So it picks up things like that. It also can detect certain changes in certain parameters that would maybe indicate flu, maybe indicate some sort of respiratory infection, COVID. I know that was a big, I remember when I first got the Whoop a while ago, that was the big thing is everybody was trying to determine if they had COVID or should I test?
The oxygen saturation really mattered.
There were oxygen saturation. They were looking at heart rate variability. They were looking at your resting heart rate. But man, they're just, those sort of things can be non-specific. Maybe not particularly sensitive to those illnesses.
Right.
And so, as you can tell, we're alluding to some of the downsides with these.
Right.
There's certainly maybe an entry point, if you're watching the trajectory of certain parameters, but it's not going to say, boom, positive for X or Y. So
Right.
And then the final category is prediction. So looking at a lot of these same parameters that we're referring to, if your heart rate is this, it's maybe predictive of this. Or if you wear your watch all the time or you have your phone on you all the time and you only manage to accumulate 2,500 steps a day, there can be maybe some sort of predictive link to some other health condition,
potential risks,
or cardiovascular disease. So there is obviously 1,000,001 roles for wearables. It's just, how are you using it individually? How are you using it in tandem with a provider? And so we can kind of hopefully square some of those circles.
Yeah. So that makes sense. I think most people are going to listen to that and go, I want to know where I'm at. And I want to know what kind of progress I'm making. And these are useful for that in general. But there are all kinds of really fun outlier situations, like you were saying, the screening, where it can kind of find some things that you might not even notice yourself. Did yours, because you just had COVID, did yours notice beforehand, before you felt it?
I just don't use it. I don't
look at closely enough.
Right. I don't use the Whoop anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't get at least from what I know with Apple Watches, I don't get a recovery score. I don't really look at heart rate variability, all of the parameters that Whoop would use to give you a recovery score.
Okay.
And so early on, 2020, 2021, it would be a normal night of sleep. Generally felt fine. And I would wake up with a 32 out of 100 recovery score.
Oh, wow.
And then you're like,
that's weird.
You're like, oh man,
what's going on?
Could it be the C word?
It could be. What I mean? We've said it enough times. We can say it now. Show's going to get banned forever.
So to your point, the same benefits for screening are also simultaneously drawbacks in the general population.
Yeah.
So these are certainly not at the point where somebody left to their own devices could dictate whether or not they need to.
These are not a replacement for a doctor.
There's so many factors that go into your resting heart rate.
Yeah.
Heart rate variability.
Yep.
Your respiratory rate while you're sleeping, for you to make an educated guess. I mean, it can point you in the direction of 10 things.
Right. Absolutely. So it's more about trajectory than it is about a specific moment necessarily. Okay. So what are the key things that people want to use on their wearable, right? This is coming out on January 2. So people are fresh into their New Year's resolutions, their goals, and they're trying to figure this out. They just got the new wearable. That's going to be their impetus for them going out and getting in shape. What are the numbers they need to be looking at? What are the things they need to be paying attention to?
As we said, there's a million things that you can look at.
Yeah, because it's overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff.
And there are proprietary parameters with different devices.
Yeah.
That'll give you a recovery score based on, Garmin's algorithm or Apple's algorithm or whatever.
Right.
So based on that, the three simplest that you and I sort of came up with, I would say, and, it feels like we're stating the obvious, but I think the obvious is okay. I would 100% say step count.
Yep.
I would 100% say heart rate. And there's a lot that goes with heart rate.
Right.
And then I would also say, kind of as a way lower tier below the first two would be some sort of sleep tracking. And not for the purposes of, I got 29 minutes of deep sleep last night and I got 32 minutes the next day. How can I optimize this back up to 32 minutes?
You're talking to me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you and the big theme here, especially with looking at sleep, would be use these to your advantage to help shape certain behaviors that you're after. Don't use it to say, you know what, I need to take and do these 15 different things to optimize this window of measurement of this certain type of wave of sleep that we don't even know if it's 100% accurate. Yes, a lot of these metrics have been validated across specific devices, but if you've had a tattoo on your wrist, or you have a lot of body hair near your wrist, or your watch slips to the left,
if it's not
tight enough, or you have it one notch looser on Tuesday than you do on Wednesday. I mean, I can't necessarily speak to the magnitude of change you might see, but those things 110% matter. And so it's just not worth freaking out about the Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday to Friday differences.
Yeah. If you're digging in real tight on those things, then it's, don't freak out.
Yep.
Calm down.
As much as they want to sell you on how accurate this is and how you can optimize every little nagging detail, it's just, I can speak from experience and saying it will nocebo you to your wit's end. And I would not suggest getting lost in it. I think, and this kind of connects us to some of our next points, but curiosity in and of itself is fine.
Yeah.
You're curious and you're learning about the different stages of sleep. Well, guess what? Your watch that you spent $300 on, it can tell you a little bit about those things. So you can look and see theoretically what would a night of sleep look like. It can educate you based upon your curiosity for a certain thing. Or it might be measuring another metric that we'll talk about, VO2 max. And it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it might just cause you to look a step further, that curiosity to say, well, what the heck is VO2 max? Why should I care about that? Should I get it measured in a lab? Or is it worthwhile just to know that I'm just going to track it over the next 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years.
Right.
So it's just taking all of these things, not even with a grain of salt, but like a heaping scoop of salt.
Right. Okay. So let's get into it. So we spent a whole episode talking about pedometers and step counters, so we don't need to belabor that point. If you guys want to know more about those, go back a few episodes. I don't recall offhand what it was. It was like 30-ish, somewhere in that area. There's a whole episode about pedometers. Dante goes into like all of the data, all of the research. It's worth watching if you want to know the details on that. Punchline is, you should get how many steps?
It depends.
You're supposed to say 8,000.
Yeah, I would say that's again, it depends on where you're coming from.
Right.
A lot of what's recommended and what I've recommended in the exercise program that we're working through is some sort of
secret.
Some sort
Don't
of
tell anybody.
Some sort of progression.
Yes.
Whether that's 10% a week, 5% a week. So if you're coming from 5,000,
bump it up.
Bump it up. But yes, I would say 8,000 is safe. I think that a lot of the literature has converged in that direction.
Yeah.
But 10,000 is a fine recommendation too. It's a clean 5-figure number, and it'll make you feel really good. And
yeah.
I don't see any downside to that either.
For the most part, you're not going to get too many steps.
Yeah. Cause hey, if you're already at 8,000, that's great. But the work doesn't stop there. You in the same sense that in exercise, you want to progressively overload and, build upon previous levels of fitness. You want to also progress your daily movement in the same way.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else that we need to talk about with pedometers right now? They've all gotten, all of the wearables, if you're wearing one from the last couple of generations, they're really pretty accurate. They're not, I mean, they may be within, 10% roughly, give or take. But when you're talking about something that you do literally thousands of times a day, getting within 10% is really good.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of it, I think what we discussed briefly there was with step counting in particular, generally you'll see underestimation.
Right.
Which is fine. So it doesn't hurt to
go a little bit further.
Go a little further there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So talking about heart rate now, you mentioned that there were kind of sub numbers, because obviously there's my heart rate and I can see it. My heart is at 98 beats per minute right now. What else is it that I'm looking for in there, and how does that help me to know anything about my health? What else is there that I should be looking at involved in that?
The first one that comes to mind would be resting heart rate. And you can Google what the normal range is. You'll see anywhere from 50, 60, maybe up to 90 or 100 where they would maybe consider you tachycardic. So that's
a fancy word.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Just essentially rapid heart rate. And so again, it depends. As your watch or your wearable, is it measuring resting heart rate just anytime it detects the lowest points of the day? Does it take a measurement when you're sleeping? Does it take it in the morning? Is it some sort of culmination of, different measurements across the day? But in general, it'll do a pretty nice job at finding kind of your low point. The importance with resting heart rate is you can use this number to say, here's where I sit, and you can track it over a long amount of time, forever basically,
right,
to see, am I getting fitter, a crude measure to say, am I getting fitter in cardiorespiratory aspects?
Because I know for me, I didn't track my heart rate. Obviously, I wasn't wearing a wearable until recently. And every time I would go in to give blood at the Red Cross, give platelets, they would always have to be like, Tyler, we're going to need you to calm down. Sit still. We're going to go away for 5 minutes. We're coming back because holy cow, your heart rate is through the roof. And so I have to make a conscious effort to go in and just be calm. But because it was just high, but that's the only exposure I had to my heart rate was only then. And if I didn't go give platelets all the time, I would only know my heart rate when I went to the doctor, which white coat syndrome makes it spike anyway. So this is a helpful thing to know what is my baseline, where am I, and to then track it over time.
Yeah. And I'm sure what you've seen is that it's much lower than what you've seen in those settings.
I kind of was panicking myself every time I went in.
Yeah. And then that was not to get lost here, but that was sort of my trouble in working with the Whoop. I think the Whoop is a great tool in the same way that a lot of these are, but it's just that crude recovery score, that crude daily strain score that it gives you. It's a culmination of all these factors that, just because my heart rate was up a little bit at work, I was moving, I'm on my feet, moving around, or I had it on during an episode and my heart rate's a little higher than normal. It factors that into that daily strain calculation. And then when it's all said and done, you go look at the day's work or you look at the day's measurements and your strain is like through the roof. So your strain, how hard, what does that tell you? How strenuous was my day?
Yeah.
And it's like, was it really?
Yeah. It didn't feel that way.
Just because my heart rate was kind of like popping up at certain points and I had stressful conversations. Like certainly I would know that my day is stressful. I know. I don't need my strain to tell me what my day was like.
We're getting into the negatives. Let's save that because that's good. But
so that's just crazy how heart rate, for example, can really drive these things in different directions. But I digress. So with resting heart rate, it's not that it's the low amount of beats that portends the benefit, because in that sense, it would be, all right,
my 20 beats per minute is ideal.
Yeah. Or it's like you have so many heartbeats in your lifetime and you want to lower that so you have less beats by the time you're,
so that you can live longer.
It's
by using those up.
Right. It's more of a reflection of the level of fitness that the individual contains. So
got it.
So as you start pushing 60, 58, 55, 50, you see some elite endurance athletes in the 40s resting heart rate, which,
wow.
It's certainly attainable, but it's that idea that your heart works more efficiently. It takes less beats, less,
as a muscle,
right.
It is stronger. And so it's forcing blood through in a more efficient way.
And so that's the thought. Yes. There's just a heightened efficiency there. So I would 100% say if you have one of these devices, keep an eye on resting heart rate.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. What else? You
reason.
said something else about heart rate. You said VO2 max and some other stuff.
I would still put that, I would say that's more, in my opinion, in the middle category.
Okay.
Just because of the device to device variation.
Sure.
How accurate is it really going to be? It can be, there's plenty of studies and there's more YouTube videos than studies of somebody saying, and if you're interested in that, just go watch those videos. I bought 15 wearables and then I
strapped them all
to
both arms.
And then I went and got my VO2 max measured at the local college, and it was within 1.7 milliliters per kilogram per minute, whatever.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm fascinated by that as well. But, there was one gentleman, his was very accurate. His wife was like 10, 15% off between measured in a lab versus measured on her Garmin. So I just don't know. We get lost in the negatives again. I think it's useful in the same sense that you can track resting heart rate to maybe measure changes in your fitness.
Yeah.
And so if you just look at it saying this VO2 max in a vacuum is probably wrong.
Right.
But if I give merit to some of these fluctuations, that's cool. If I see it going up, it's probably a good thing. If it's going down, I probably need to look at something.
Got it.
That's
okay.
all.
So you're looking for trend lines.
Trends. It's all trends for sure.
Okay.
Trends for sure. If you're measuring, monitoring, you're looking for trends, no matter what these metrics are.
What about...
and so I don't want to lose the other heart rate point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What other heart rate point?
I think even equally as important to resting heart rate would be, what is my heart rate doing during exercise? And so a lot of people will interpret that in different ways. That might be, oh my gosh, I deadlifted for the first time and I happened to look down at my watch and my heart rate was 162. I'm like, what happened? Did I do cardio? Like, that's the thought. It's just that, first of all, no, there's just different physiologic adaptations occurring. It's not cardio. Contracting muscles in general, it's just will portend a whole different set of benefit and changes.
Right.
What I use it for is specifically, stating the obvious, would be more cardiovascular training, more endurance training. And we talked a little bit about heart rate zones and that sort of thing in past episodes. So for maybe a deeper discussion on that, that's probably the place to go. But in general, if you're going for a walk, it's going to measure your heart rate. If you're on a bike, it's going to measure your heart rate. If you're running, it's measuring your heart rate. So not that you need to look at it 100% of the time.
Right.
You can use it to track a trend over time. So at this effort that I felt, it was a 10-minute pace that I was running at, or it was a 16-minute pace I was walking at.
Mm-hmm.
In December, my heart rate got all the way up to 145 at that pace. And then in February, it was at that same pace. I look back, my heart rate was only 136. And so in the same way, you want to see your resting heart rate maybe dip a little bit over time to reflect higher fitness. That's potentially what you'll be seeing in the actual work that you're doing. You'll see yourself doing running or walking at the same speed at a lower heart rate is a good way to say, is the last 8 weeks of my exercise, is it doing anything for the things that I care about, my health primarily?
Right.
So another way to look at trends. The second thing, if you're more interested in, nerding out a little bit, or you're more interested in trying to just take the objective measures of effort and use them to compare with subjective measures of effort, you could say, in the same examples of running and walking, you could say, okay, that felt like a RPE. There's a bunch of different RPE scales. That felt like a 6 out of 10. But I look back and my heart rate was 170 the whole time. And you're like, it wasn't that hard though.
Right.
I would say, who the heck cares? Like, Did it feel good? Great. You could probably keep doing that, and eventually it'll probably go down.
Right.
Then there are a lot of people who they refuse to tap into how did that feel, and they'll go out there and run, and they'll go out there and walk or bike, and they'll just push it to 170 no matter what. And they'll just say, I don't care. Even though my heart was 150, if my legs were on fire and it was a 10 out of 10, but no pain, no gain.
Right.
You know, there's, again, the key message there is objective measures, great. Even better when you're using them with a subjective measure of your
using
effort.
them together.
Use them in tandem, because on every given, if you're in this for the long haul and you just spent $400 on your watch, like,
yeah,
use both of those things. Don't just because you got all these fancy tools, throw out how you're feeling and what the day brought and how you've been sleeping and your life stressors. Like, there's a way to kind of,
because there are days when you're off.
There are,
and there's days when you're on, and and I've in my short time trying to take care of myself, I've already felt that, where one day you go in and you hit a personal record on something, and you're like, wow, that didn't feel bad at all. Right. And then 2 weeks later, you go to do the same thing and you can't crack, 80% of that without feeling like you're going to die. So absolutely, it makes sense that you need to do both at the same time. Exactly.
And so the final layer to that, focusing a little more objectively, again, if you wanted to nerd out, let's say, you've been doing some conditioning, you went from walking to jogging to now you have some days where you run harder.
Yep.
You could say, all right, I'm going to look at these heart rate zones.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep an eye on this as I'm going and try to stay in a given zone, because I know that there are different adaptations that can occur across these different zones.
Right.
Not throwing out the subjective measures, but there's a way to tailor your training, maybe with some help of a coach, or do a little reading. But again, these are not perfect measurements of heart rate either, but they're generally pretty accurate.
Right.
And a lot of people will add a heart rate monitor to, like a heart rate strap that they'll wear on their chest.
Yeah.
And it'll just feed the data to the watch, and then
doubles it up.
Yes. And so that's, a way to make it more accurate, depending on, it's like anything.
Yeah.
How deep in the weeds do you want to get lost? You could take this very far just with heart rate.
Yeah.
But I use it, to sort of hone in on these different heart rate zones, because I want my easy days of aerobic work. I want the heart rate data that I get. I want that to reflect that, so that when I look back, it's like, you know what? In the last 6 months, I did 100 hours of, this kind of work.
Right.
And there's no confusion.
Yeah.
I wasn't in zone 5 all those days when I thought I was doing a bunch of zone 2 work. Like, you want to develop a lot of these systems in isolation. In the same way, you want to maybe focus on lifting with, your back musculature or your lower legs. You want to focus on the different aerobic and anaerobic zones.
Nothing is wasted.
Right.
But when you're trying to target something, you want to be able to target that thing.
And it can help you. Yes. And it can help you shape your weekly exercise too, by focusing on things more isolated.
Okay. So now we're getting into the squishy area of sleep. So I used to, 47,000 years ago, I had one of the early wearables from a different brand, and my sleep numbers scared me so badly that I stopped wearing it.
Yeah. I got to the same point myself. So because of that, I would use it for nothing other than, because these, let me mention, none of these are validated to, unless you get a specific sleep study set of devices.
Yeah.
None of these are validated to give you a strong indication of something like sleep apnea, or if you have insomnia or something like that.
Most of the ones that everybody's wearing, the Apple Watches, the Garmins, the Whoops, whatever, those are not specifically designed for this.
Yeah.
And they're not that accurate.
Right. And I think that these companies, if they are in the same way that Apple now has the capability with certain watches that you can get a validated EKG.
Yeah.
So it could pick up abnormal rhythms. Like that's great. Right. I mean, I see no issues with that, but certainly it's got to be, looked at in the proper clinical context too.
Right.
Like we're not EKG reading. We had like entire courses on it in pharmacy school. And
you're not going to go to the hospital and the doctor's going to slap an Apple Watch on you.
Sure.
That's not how that works.
But it certainly opens the door to a conversation. Yeah, it certainly opens the door. And I think in order for these wearables to continue to build credibility, these companies, I would be willing to bet they're working to validate more things like, can this pick up sleep apnea? Can this pick up something that can trigger something along those lines that can be really useful from a health perspective?
Makes sense.
Not there yet. No. So with sleep.
So why are we looking at sleep then?
We're looking at sleep because it is often one of the, if you look at behavioral change research, or you look at somebody trying, like just the classic trio of things, I'm really trying to dial in my sleep, really trying to start exercising, and I'm really trying to eat better. It's like, how often do you hear somebody say that? Or how often do you say that to yourself? I'm just going to focus on these big three things and I'll be fine. Yeah. It seems as though, not for everybody, but a lot of people can dial in their sleep. Like they can, you start setting alarms, and for a good while you can go up to bed at a good time and you can wake up at a reasonable time, and you're like, hey, I checked that box. That's huge. For a lot of people, and for me included, when you have the ability on a wearable to give you a wind down alert. Yeah. Yep. Put your phone on do not disturb. It does it all for you. It sort of just puts you, it's just a quick reminder at whatever time you set it at to say, okay, now is the time that you're supposed to wind down. Now is when you can commit to what you said you were going to commit to. Right. And you have to make a conscious effort to then take your phone, take your watch out of that mode. Yeah. To, go back to daytime mode. Back to daytime mode. Yeah. So, and for a lot of people, it's like they get sick of that in 3 weeks and they're done with it. But in general, again, that helps. That's one layer. So this is all behavioral. It's a very much behavioral positive reinforcement lens. And then there's something to be said about, so all of these devices will look at sleep onset latency. Mm-hmm. So it's basically how quickly once you're in bed, basically, how quickly do you then fall asleep? And so there are measures of sleep latency that are clinically used to say, okay, if you're past 20 minutes, if you're past 30 minutes of laying in bed, we might want to screen you further, talk to you further if maybe you have insomnia. Sure. So what they've seen in some small studies, like with the Oura Ring and Whoop, I know kind of hangs their hat on this sort of stuff. Once they started using this device, they really honed in on their sleep latency. People went from 30 minutes to 21 minutes to 14 minutes. Wow. Let's say. Yeah. So, and then you wake up and maybe you're like, okay, I don't believe what it said about my deep sleep. But it seems as though that's the sleep latency. That's pretty accurate. I went up to bed. I was able to wind myself down and I was asleep within 15, 20 minutes. Like that is a huge, huge win for people. Yeah. And so in that aspect, to be able to tap into that routine, wake up in the morning, see what time you actually went to bed. Right. And see what time you actually woke up to say, you know what, like in the 6 months prior, I thought I was getting 7 hours of sleep. I thought I was getting 8 hours of sleep, but really it was more like 6 because I was, had my TV on for 20 minutes and then I was talking to my spouse for another 30 minutes. Like it's able to kind of help you dig in to those behavioral details, not the REM sleep cycle, sleep phase 2, sleep 3, right. Block 4, right. 29.9 minutes here. Like it lets you just hone in on the behavioral aspects. And there's some good data that the wearables plus maybe some, tailored individual counseling along with that can really help the sleep changes stick. Nice. It's the issues with maybe exercise. It's the issues with diet. It's the issues with step count. Maybe they don't stick as much as sometimes as some of the sleep reinforcement. Well, so that's why I like it. If you can get that under control, it's a huge win. Yeah. One thing at a time, man. That's really cool. Okay. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that it's generally really good for. There are a few things that are less useful, overrated, definitely completely nonsense. How far are we going to go with this? I still look at a lot of these. Yep. but I think they're just worry about the big ones.
Yeah. So when you see these, the accuracy is very questionable, and don't overthink them. Is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are VO2 max. We mentioned that already. What else?
The other one would be calories burned.
Oh,
I mean, even from a behavioral lens, I see, and I'm guilty of this, I see this reinforce negative, not even just negative behavior, but almost just inaccurate behavior.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't make sense. So what I mean is somebody takes up running, they had a 6 mile run and they see that they burned 690 calories or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, shoot.
Yep.
I'm going to eat that 690 calories right after because I got to replenish those calories.
Right.
It's just not that clean.
Got it.
I mean, we have videos on energy expenditure, and I talk like a goofball about how complicated a lot of this is. And it's a huge misunderstanding widely. Like, you don't just 1-to-1 burn the amount of calories that your wearable says you burn every time you walk or exercise. And if you do, guess what? There are 23 and a half other hours in the day that you're not walking or running, that the systems in your body are upregulating certain things, downregulating certain things with respect to metabolism, the amount of muscle mass that you have. What have you been consistently eating? Have you been losing a ton of weight before this already?
Yep. Yeah.
So there's a million things that will, even if you burn 690 calories, you're probably going to burn less later in the day. Like there's all I'm trying to say is there's a, without getting too deep into it, there's a recalibration that occurs that, it's great. Celebrate the 690 calories that you burned, but there's something on the back end that's
don't use it as
against
license.
Don't use it as license to make up for it directly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's questionable accuracy and in the grand scheme, really questionable usefulness.
Yeah. I legitimately never look at that.
Yeah.
Like I
actually didn't realize mine had it until we were prepping for this, and I was flipping through and I was like, oh, wow. And it was like, you've burned 1,600 calories today. And it was 10 in the morning. And I'm like, there's no chance. I mean, I went to the gym, but there's no chance I burned 1,600 calories by 10 in the morning. That's not a thing that happened.
Yeah. Honestly, it would be fun to revisit that a little bit.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it would be something that I'm not sure that people will have a million take-home points to take action on with something like that. But I just think that's one of those educational aspects that can really drive home a big picture issue with people. You know, that I'm gonna, it can take away that mentality of I'm gonna work out so that I can eat this.
Right.
I'm gonna burn this many calories on the elliptical so I can eat this.
Right.
It's just not that clean.
Right.
I think that in general, the more muscle mass that you build, the more that you are active, I think it can afford you some dietary flexibility to an extent. I really do.
Yeah.
I do think it can, but not to the extent that it's going to be enough to lose weight. That's why none of these wearable devices, none of these studies show that they did anything, whether it's reinforcement of the wearable device with individualized like texting and reinforcement. It generally does nothing to sustain weight loss for somebody. Why? Because these are tracking your activity for the most part. And we know that to lose weight, let's say, it's a way more intervention points than increasing the lever of physical activity. That's not the main lever to pull for that. So we can try to educate a little bit on some of the energy expenditure implications that, really drive that home.
We can hit that another time for sure.
But the other one, which we sort of alluded to at the outset, is heart rate variability.
Yeah.
And that is the main parameter that Whoop, for example, or other companies will use to calculate a stress score, a strain score, a daily recovery score.
What is heart rate variability? I've heard that before.
So heart rate variability, it's almost counterintuitive in my opinion, but it's simply a measure of the variation in time between each heartbeat. So you would think, oh yeah, my heart beats at the same.
Yeah, it's a consistent rhythm.
But there's very tiny amounts of time difference between each beat. And so the lower, you would think, okay, if my heart's beating more consistently with less variability, so therefore a lower HRV, that would be better. Like, doesn't that just sound logically better?
100%.
That's not it. It's the higher level of variability between beats, the higher or the more link there is to better health outcomes.
Okay, so would it be correct to say then the HRV is measuring, so it's like your heart is receiving the signal, hey, we need blood. Hey, we need blood. Hey, we need blood. And the higher variability means that your heart is able to go longer between beats or longer in general without needing to freak out to send blood. Is that?
Potentially, because it's not really about the length and time either between beats. It's just that like it beats here, then it's just like, it seems like you're talking about an arrhythmia.
Yeah, it's like being more sporadic is good, but that's not what you're saying.
It is, but it's more not. Sporadic basically in this very micro time frame is better.
Because it's milliseconds. It's not.
You're talking a very small unit of time.
Okay.
Yes. And so
but it's overrated anyway.
It is, right. The devices and the remarkable part of it is the devices that track heart rate variability, they've gotten really good. The sensors have gotten more high tech. There's no shortage of good technology to pick that up.
Yeah.
Before it was just a lab valve. It was a lab thing.
Yeah.
Now you can buy them for $100. Like it's a marvel that you can pick something up like this. It's not saying that it's always perfect. And again, things like body hair and tightness of the strap and where was it? Is it to the right, to the left? Those things will certainly change measurements. But in general, this is from my understanding, is a classic example of one, noceboing people out of just doing exercise.
What do you mean SIBO?
So nocebo, like instead of something helping you in nudging you in a positive direction, it almost just it basically tells you, like, let's say your HRV is low, your recovery is low, and you wake up and you feel fine, but you see a HRV reading of 10 and your recovery score is 3%. You're like, well, what the heck? I feel fine.
Yeah.
You're going to say, well, maybe I'm not going to run today.
Right.
I'm good. I'm going to just take it easy today.
Right.
For basically no reason.
Yeah. You felt fine.
There's no reason, because it's not like it's going to realistically hurt you. Unless you're seeing these very low HRV numbers that, so here's the thing. They linked HRV early on to different different disease states. So individuals with heart failure, their heart rate variability was generally lower. And so people kind of take that outlook and they say, okay, well, if we look at healthy people and we see these changes and it's low for a healthy person, it's got to mean kind of the same thing. If we can get people to optimize that number, then clearly they're more recovered.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that well. I think in general, where we can say it's better is if you are more of an endurance focused person. Sure. I think you can gauge the cardiovascular stress that occurs from workout to workout, from week to week, to month. I think maybe that's the heart rate variability in that sense can be a little more telling. Trend lines. But if you're somebody who's walking 30 minutes 3 times a week and you resistance train twice a week, if you're using that number and that strain score to dictate what you do in the gym, it's out of in my opinion, you're taking that number way out of context. It's not helpful. And so that's my point. It'll nocebo you to think like, I don't know. Instead of just saying, you know what, I'm just going to stick to the script.
Stick to the plan, right.
I'm going to, look at this freaking number that just doesn't really tell me a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah.
And there's now study after study that will look at, okay, what is heart rate variability doing for, I'm now lifting weights. If my heart rate variability is high or low or in the middle or changes from here to there on a given day or week, how's it going to affect my performance in the gym, how I'm feeling, all those sorts of things. It doesn't at all, because it's those sorts of muscular contractions that, again, you deadlift and your heart rate goes to 160. It's much different than hopping on the bike,
right,
bringing your heart rate up to 160
and holding
it for 20 minutes. It's a very different physiological response.
Yeah.
It's a massively different response.
Right.
And so with that said, you simply cannot trust that metric to tell you a whole heck of a lot with respect to resistance training.
Makes sense.
So it's just a number that's just you're like going to be ping ponging between subjective and objective. And I feel fine, but it says I'm not fine. And it doesn't help you to feel fine and wake up and see a recovery score of 40%
right.
3 days a week.
Okay. So ignore that.
And also, if you sleep like crap and you have 8 drinks the night before, guess what? Your heart rate variability is going to be like 2.
Yeah, it's going to be real bad.
So, and guess what? You already knew that.
Yeah, you should.
You already knew that you went to a Christmas party and you had 7 beers and you wake up the next day, you probably are going to not feel like you're on your A game, and your heart rate variability will just be a mirror of that. It'll just tell you, see, I told you,
Yeah. That has been interesting for me, just realizing, because I don't ever drink 8 beers, but if I have a drink before bed, going, oh, wow, it does affect it. It does change how well I sleep. And not that I'm going to hang my hat on it, but it is interesting to go, there is a correlation. You can't ignore it.
Yeah. And you know what? And again, that was my goodness, Whoop, like they hang their whole business on this measurement. Basically, it's a little more complicated than this. It's an algorithm versus this one measurement.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people who are still the weekend warrior type, and they just joined a gym and they still want to go out Friday and Saturdays, but they're kind of ready to move past that. And then they wake up and they see this 3% recovery score when they have, a couple drinks and whatever else, and they sleep like crap and they stayed up too late. That sort of shame from that number, it affects different people much differently.
Right.
For me, I can't handle that. I already will beat myself up enough, it's like you're well aware of what the behaviors are that you're striving for. I also don't need somebody to give me a score out of 100.
I don't need my watch to shame me.
I'm sensitive. I'm very sensitive. So for those that are also sensitive, I forget the strain scores. In my opinion.
Got it. Okay. That is fantastic. We've covered a lot on that. And man, that conversation went longer than I expected. Is there anything else that we're not covering? You mentioned, not tachycardia. What is it you said? Oh, EKG. You mentioned EKG. I know that's a new thing for the Apple Watch, and this is not an advertisement for any specific brand or anything like that. There are a lot of fun things like that it seems to me, if you have a specific health problem, it might be worth looking into the specifics of different brands for something unique that they offer. But by and large, any wearable that you get will cover your pedometer, your heart rate, and your sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. Then let me say this. I don't want to forget this. No. So if you made it to this point, this is probably in my opinion, the biggest takeaway.
Okay.
And so this idea, it comes from one small study. It's out of UCLA. They looked at the Oura ring specifically. So it's like the Whoop, it's like the Apple Watch, except it's a ring. It's a nice thing if you're married and you want to wear a ring or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I considered it for that reason. Like it is kind of neat.
Yeah.
But what am I going to do? Wear like 10 devices every day? But
maybe.
Know. Anyway, it's a pretty well-respected wearable device. It's like in the top 5.
Okay.
And they looked at VO2 max changes, step counts, resting heart rate. They looked at all types of different health measurements. And they looked at by, there's like a washout period where people kind of do a baseline of physical activity and certain behaviors. And then they randomize them into, it's kind of hard to randomize. Like people know they're getting a wearable.
Right.
And so that's kind of the point. Anyway, certain people got wearable devices, the Oura ring. Some people didn't. And then they had some people stop using them. And then they had some people continue to use them. They had some people who had guided feedback tailored to their data that continued for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Some people only had it for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Some people got very generic feedback. And so what they essentially did is they looked at all these things in tandem. So the people that were just given the wearable and that was it.
Right.
Well, for those people, as much of the other evidence suggests and much of the other experts suggest, that having the device only kind of gets you so far. So it might really, when you went for Christmas morning, you wake up, you get your new Apple Watch, you're excited to track your heart rate, you're excited to count your steps, you're excited to, get those goals checked off at the end of the day and the week.
Right.
It does for a short time motivate, hold you accountable, guide you in the direction of some positive behaviors. But then you see that
drop off.
Yeah. This study reflected that same sort of idea. However, for the individuals that it was sustained change, so a sustained increase in their activity levels, a sustained benefit to sleep latency, a sustained benefit to these different parameters, they found that it was the tailored, individualized feedback that they were also getting in addition to the data. So the person wasn't just like waking up with the data like you and I saying, that's good, that's bad, that's fine. There was a professional, it was like an exercise scientist or a coach or a scientist who was saying, great job, but you know what? You can do this better. We can look at this, try to focus on this, or keep it up.
Yeah.
So, something tailored, something that was very specific. And so to sum this all up, getting one of these devices, I think, is recommended. Yeah. I think it's a great idea. I love it. You just kind of set the timer when you start exercising, or you set it when you go out for a walk. It's kind of fun and motivating to track these things. It's great, but there are some days you're going to forget it. And there are times where you're not going to care. You're going to want to try a new device.
Yeah.
And there's just things that lend itself to that waning of motivation, the ebbs and flows of motivation. But with the behavioral lifestyle changes, with some counseling and maybe working with a coach for a time, or working with a friend who can interpret some of this information, it's the device plus the human relationship that can help drive some really sustained benefit.
That's awesome. That makes sense.
So I think that's what really helped me sum this up. Because you know what? I have a coach. Thank God. I'm fortunate enough to have that. And, there are certain things that will pop up with sleep, or there are certain things that will pop up with conditioning that I was doing, and I'll send that information to him. And there's that kind of guided feedback. Yes, I can interpret a lot of this myself now. I've been looking at it, reading about it. But just to have somebody say, oh, you know what? That was awesome. I remember a while ago, you could not hold that pace. Or I remember your heart rate spiking, and, or that workout used to take you 2 hours. Now it takes you 1 hour and 20 minutes. Dude, props to you, man. That's awesome. There is something so, for my sensitive self, there's something very nice about those two things in tandem.
Got it. I love it. I'm excited to wear mine, find out what's going on. We'll check back in a year and see if I've learned anything. Well, that is it for us today. If you liked what you heard, please give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, a review, leave a comment. We love those. You can drop a question down there. We respond to those, seriously. If you have anything you want us to talk about, leave that in the comments. Alternatively, you can email us with your questions. Those come to questions@askjoedimatteo.com. That's AskJoedimatteo.com. That's also AskJoedimatteo.com is where you can register for our email newsletter and find out about all the sales. We sell supplements, protein powders, omegas, all kinds of fantastic stuff, all there on our website. Go check out the website, AskJoedimatteo.com. Sign up for the email. You can find past episodes of this show. You can find the show that started all of this, the Ask Joe DiMatteo show. What else? What else should we tell people?
I don't know.
I don't have my credits pulled up here. Hang on. I'm supposed to thank people. I'm supposed to thank Josiah Schwein.
Never
mind. Michael Deppish, our editor. Joyce Gibb, our nurse practitioner who handles private consultations. Diane Silverman, who manages our product. Terry, who does scheduling. Cecilia, who does distribution. That's Dante DiMatteo. I'm Tyler Andrews, and that is it for us this week. We'll see you guys next week.